Okay, this is OPEX pain for energy system training on the assault rower. Just a brief description of the energy systems again. Remember that gain was trying to put as much energy into a very short period of time as possible. As we move along the curve now, pain is that next area. Doesn't mean we're doing it in that order, particularly because of progression, but just because it occurs that way. This is the area where you're trying to extend that power out as far as possible, but it will be unsustainable. And then remember that there's the third aspect, which is sustainability, where that power, when it starts to diminish, it can be extended for a long period of time. And therefore we have gain, pain, and sustain. And the reason why I start with that too is that you actually need to have enough strength. Remember with the strength we talked about for OPEX gain for on the assault rower, a general amount of strength, and we gave you some standards to go on for that, and as well sustained practice. So you may have to jump ahead over time to see exactly how you train sustain effectively. But you need to have both of those in order to manufacture what we're calling pain as good as possible. And this is theoretically put together in this manner, so you can understand it. You have to be strong enough, and you have to be aerobic enough in order to express and recover from pain. So if you're strong enough, you can create a whole bunch of power, and if you're aerobic enough, you can recover from that power that you're trying to elicit, okay? So it's not only that you need these as prerequisites, because you can certainly try to train pain, but it's far more beneficial that you'll have better results in terms of the power output and the recovery from that power output should you practice both gain and sustain. Now that does lead into us discussing, well, pain for what? Because realistically, you don't want to train to be unsustainable. So when you're doing painful activities, the idea is to really get a metabolic effect. And there's a bunch of other things you can gain from it, but the idea is to get as much of a metabolic effect as possible because it is unsustainable activity. So think of it theoretically. Why would we want to do pain? Well, we'd want to try to get the metabolic effect, try to get a stress point, and it's possible, we're not sure, but it's possible that that may help us in aerobic capacity over time if we practice that frequently. Now the issue with this is that if you train it too often because of the resources you're trying to put into a short period of time, it can result in burnout. That's a very, highly arguable term, but if you don't have all the resources to put into a piece of work and sustain that for a period of time, you're just going to have to come up with different compensatory mechanisms in order to make that work happen. So what we're going to recommend for pain is that you possibly do it twice. It may be possible you can do it 3 times in 1 year with 4 to 6 week plans of that pain cycle, okay? So is it possible you can do it 3 times or 4 times? Maybe, but in most cases, just for the benefits that I was saying, for a big metabolic boost, you may enhance your aerobic training, or actually you just want to practice it because you're strong enough and aerobic enough, then twice a year a maximum for 4 to 6 weeks. And that allows you then to at least get the right dose. And the humorous thing around that is when people train pain frequently, the more and more times they train it over time, they'll say that they'll understand that once or twice a year is enough. So it'll take you a while to even get to that point if you haven't trained it whatsoever. So we also start with some standards and using half a body weight in pounds. So if I'm 170 pounds, trying to get 85 calories in 3 minutes would be a great idea. And these are not, that's kind of like a real high standard to shoot for. We'll give you some of those ideas, what's going to be involved in the calories you can shoot for sustain as well. And remember we talked about peak wattage for the rower. What you're looking for here is this is a long-term goal. Now, for most, based upon practice, this will be not common knowledge and fairly out of reach. But you have to remember that what the goal you're going for here for 3 minutes is a really high amount of power. So you do want to chase that because that's somewhat of an indication that you are actually training that particular energy system effectively, okay? Now in regards to this is the 3-minute test you're going to use to determine exactly if you're making improvements on OPEX pain over that 4 to 6 week progression. And what I would ask you to do is to simply just go for it as a test in a controlled situation. We're going to talk about training it, and then you're going to retest it with the exact same test in the same form of control scenario. So to make it really simple, do the test, 3 minutes, as max calories as you can get in 3 minutes as your score, and your goal is the most amount of work you can do in 3 minutes. That's the attitude you have. You train for 4 to 6 weeks, which we'll talk about, and then you're going to retest that exact same test in the same controlled manner with the same machine, same time of the week, same time of the day, same weekly developed pattern, okay? So the more variables you have come into that changes up the controls, the more chance that you're not going to be able to look back on the training and say that was a safe, effective implementation of the training process, okay? So test that. Here's something you can shoot for. Train the system, come back and retest it, and see if there's some improvements made in that 3 minutes. Now, the way you're going to train it is 60 seconds on, and that's at an effort of 95%. What we mean by 60 seconds at 95% is that you want to remember the idea if you had to go as hard as possible for 60 seconds one time, you're going to go just less than that. Because your idea is to be able to train the 60 seconds multiple times. This is testing. This is training. So if we're testing for the 3 minutes, we're going 100% for the 3 minutes. If we're training it, we're going at 60 seconds with a perceived exertion of 95. This is not, 5% off the total amount you averaged on cals here, etc. This is a perceived exertion just to make you understand as you're going through it. It should be like, I'm not going guns a-blazing because I need to do a bunch of sets of this. I just want to back off just a tiny bit, okay? So you're going to go 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off. I repeated this before. You can go back and refer to energy system training on the assault runner and energy system training on the assault bike. It generally feels like 5 minutes is way too much. So when you do 5 minutes, if you do it appropriately, you'll know that it's the right kind of dose. If you feel that over time with 2 or 3 or 4 repeats of this, you'll feel like 5 minutes is not enough. That's when you know you're actually developing enough power and putting enough effort in to get the benefits metabolically for the 60 seconds, okay? So 60 seconds, when you first look at it, it may not seem like that much, but over time you want to be able to, I guess you're searching for, 5 minutes being too short. That's when you know you're developing the right kind of energy system, okay? So 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off. Now the first time you do this, your goal is to try to do 2 repeats. Now the reason why you want to do 2 repeats, just because as opposed to just 1, is that you want to actually see if you're doing repeatable efforts, which is called training of the energy system, right? So if you just did 60 seconds all out, and your goal was to do 2, you won 60 seconds all out, you took 5 minutes rest, and then you did 60 seconds again, and you weren't capable of producing the same amount of power, then that's not a completed session. Your goal is to try to get as high as possible, 95% of the best 1 minute, rest 5 minutes, and to do it twice in the first session as a starter just to kind of see exactly what your repeat performance is like. And then your goal over time, twice a week, is to add more repeats. So let's say the first week, Tuesday and Friday, you're going to do this twice a week, which is what we recommend for frequency for 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off, 2 times, Tuesday and Friday. Your goal, and that would be a score, I'm sorry to get ahead of myself there, a score would be, let's say you did 385 meters, okay? 385 meters in the first 60 seconds, take 5 minutes break, 385 meters in the second, and now you have Wednesday, Thursday until you go again. On Friday, you get another 385 meters, rest 5 minutes, another 305 meters. That would be considered a successful categorization of perceived exertion and the work you wanted to do in the week. What are we going to do the next week? Tuesday and Friday. Tuesday, you're going to go for 385 3 times. So it's 60 seconds, 95%, 5 minute break, rest 5 minutes, come back and try the 60 seconds again, another 385. Rest 5 minutes, another 385. So the question would remain, well, how many times can I get up to it? Well, you're constrained by 2 things. Number 1 is I said it has to be completed, I would argue, in about 4 to 6 weeks. If you go beyond that, as I said, you're getting into overtraining and overreaching point, okay? So you're going to go 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off, twice a week, at least 2 to start. How many times are we going to do that? Well, the constraint is 4 to 6 weeks. The second one is your functional capabilities. So can you get up to 7, 8, 9 sets of this? Well, you can, but you won't want to, and you're going to get probably diminishing returns based upon the power output you're going to try to work into it. So I would say over time, if you do get to the point where you're getting up to 3, 4, 5 repeats of this in a session, your goal the next session would be to do a little bit more work in the 60 seconds. So let's go back to the 385 meters, if you remember that. So let's say I got up to 385, 5 minutes rest, 4 times, okay? And you were saying, you know what? I heard James talk about it on energy system training for the assault rower, that the progression should be, if I get up to 4 or 5, I'm going to try to do more work each time. So the next 3 days later, the next time you're going to do it, you're going to try to do 4 repeats again of 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off, but you're going to try to do 392 meters each time. So you see how I tried to just do a little bit more work each time, but it was repetitive. So I'm still holding the constraints that we had of repeatability. And just on that word alone, some people may think that because you're only looking for a big metabolic response, your goal is not repeatability. No, because it's energy system training, not testing, you're looking for repeatability because you're trying to get metabolic memory. You're trying to get the same memory stamped in, right, of that metabolic dose response for 60 seconds so that you can benefit from this when you want to come back and retest it. And as I said, if you want to get a metabolic stress, a booster to the aerobic system, or just stress adaptation. So just to be clear on that, each of the sessions you'll do is 60 seconds on, 5 minutes off, at least twice. And then you're going to add up and add more sets over time. And if you get up to 4, 5, even possibly 6 sets, I would recommend still using the context of repeatability per set, but trying to do a little bit more power each set the next time, okay? And the greatest thing around this is that you underpace and you're really capable of doing more power. That's fine, just do more power over time. The worst case scenario is if you try to overreach and you're doing, your expectations are way too high. You try to do 3 repeats on the second day, and by your third one, you're falling power because you went too hard the first 2 sets. Ho-hum, right? So that's actually going to put you back like 4 or 5 days in terms of what you're capable of getting back up to speed, and now you're trying to reverse engineer what you just compensated for, okay? So you're better off underpacing and then adding more work over time. And again, what's the hurry? Just give you the time to learn the practice to get the benefit from it. So I think within that I talked about the progression of it, but I'll recap exactly why we're doing this and how to put it together. You want to be strong enough and train aerobic training, which is coming up, before you want to do this preferably, okay? So in a lot of cases, what the unfortunate reality is here, a lot of people, let's take a general consensus of those using fitness have access to the assault air rower. There's a very small percentage of people who will actually be strong enough and have done enough aerobic training to actually experiment with pain. It doesn't mean, though, we can't discuss it. So when you do get there, you can practice it. Why do you do pain? You do it for metabolic stress, metabolic adaptation, a stress response, or aerobic booster. And we talked about the benefits of that. This is kind of a standard you can shoot for and just say, wow, body weight, divided by half. Okay, geez, that's that many calories per minute. Yeah, exactly, because it's a lot of work that you're trying to put into a very short period of time. So that's a standard you can shoot for over time, something to look for. If you're going to put this into a plan, do a 3-minute test, figure out what your score is, put it into training, and then come back and retest it. 4 to 6 weeks, I would say, maximum. I'm just going to say no more than 2 times a year, okay? Just stay with that. It's going to help a whole bunch of people. The way you're going to do it, 60 seconds on. Is it really, 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 really hard? No, it's not. It's about 95% effort. So it is hard, but it's 95% perceived exertion, 5 minutes off. If you feel this is too long, you should go harder here. That's pretty simple. Every time you do it, which is twice a week, you're going to do 2 sessions, 3, 4, maybe 5, maybe 6. And just think about this too as I'm mentioning it. 5 minutes and 1 minute. That's 5 and 1, 6 minutes total. 6 times 6, that's 36 minutes total just for that piece of work. So I would assume you're doing other things, but just think about that as we add up more and more over time, okay? And then your progression of that, as I said, is you're going to be through the sets that you do. And just remember to keep repeatability a part of the process. And that should get you on your way to practicing the more painful aspect of metabolic training on the assault rower.